I don't know about you, but when it comes time for my middle management to sit down with frontline staff for formal evaluations, I get very nervous about what's about to happen. Expectations run rampant. Educators who have been evaluated for years by their supervisors all of a sudden fall prey to being too nice or too harsh. And at the same time, staff feel that they're superstars when that's often not the case. And when it's over, is there a plan or just hard feelings? Today, we're going to talk with Dr. Daniel Shore and Sara Silverberg from E21 to talk about the ins and outs of this important aspect of the staff experience. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised where it ends up. This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back, everybody, to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
Hi, I'm Sara Silverberg. Want me now?
Oh, that's sweet. And we were actually, Tiff was on mute, but it's okay, Tiff.
Sorry.
It's real. We're keeping it real.
Talk, and I was like, oh God, is someone supposed to jump in? Okay.
Wait to pop in, Sarah. I'm Tiffany Yvonne from Purposeful Play in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
So anyway, Sara, welcome. Yeah. So Sara is zooming in all the way from Edinburgh, Scotland.
Yes.
Right, where she has ended up where she has started out.
Very true. Very true. So yeah.
So Sara, you've had a pretty interesting little camp journey. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I did start in Scotland. I'm from here, and after leaving university, I saw an advert for BUNEC or Camp America to have this wonderful summer in the US. And so I thought that sounds like an adventure. And I went for this one summer to a summer camp to then come back and live my life. And 17 years later, I was still working for that very same summer camp. So I think I've trod a very familiar path with lots of international counselors, came on a J1 visa, and then, went through the whole process of various visas and various processes to end up staying in America and working for summer camp, because it changed my life completely. And I am back in Scotland now, and still, as you can tell, in the camp industry. So it has a huge influence. It's been a huge influence on me. So I worked in the resident camp space.
You're an advert for the J1 visa now.
I am now,
Look at that, how that worked out.
A good investment.
Heck
yeah, I know, right?
Heck yeah. And then we have with us Dr. Daniel Shore. How's it going, the modern doctor?
Yeah, it's good. I'm not the stuffy professor you might be imagining. I grew up in Illinois. Went to summer camp in southeastern Wisconsin, right outside of Milwaukee, actually. So Yvonne, I know your territory well. I was a camper and then moved my way into staff. I ended up being on staff for 10 summers in total, working up through CIT to counselor to unit head to assistant director. And the only thing that really interrupted my camp journey was getting a PhD in workplace psychology. And as I was working through that, I did my master's thesis at camp on staff recognition and rewards and how it makes people feel and the culture that's created around that. Ultimately came back into the camping space in 2018, got connected with Sara. We started working on a few different ideas together and realized, wow, we have a really strong intersection on the staff experience and the feedback and evaluation piece. And that's when I joined in the E21 effort, and we reinvigorated it and got it to where it is. And we're excited to talk generally about the staff experience and supervisor experience in the feedback and evaluation processes.
Awesome. So guys, let's start talking about the importance of this whole and by the way, I hate the term evaluation. Oh, just like starting right there. It's the worst. What's your operative word for it?
What's our word for it?
Yeah. Like if you started broaching the subject of these staff evaluations, how would you frame it? What would you call it? If just because I think that's the first step. You gotta stop calling it that.
The whole paradigm of evaluation, as you're indicating, Andy, like really puts us off on the wrong foot for what we're trying to accomplish. The goal here is development. The goal here is to check in, to support, to serve the staff, set them up for success, rather than create a power dynamic where the supervisors are coming in once, twice a summer to lay down their evaluations and critique. And as you indicated at the beginning of this, what do we do from there? So I'll let Sarah jump in as well, but I would call this a developmental check-in.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. I think you're absolutely right, Andy. The word evaluation or even review, which is what a lot of them do as well. We have a midway review, we have an end of summer review, but to me, a review is looking back over something, whereas we want to have these conversations in real time, especially in a summer camp environment where the time that you have is so short. By the time you're reviewing something 4 weeks in, oh my goodness, that's lifetimes in the summer. And so either review or evaluation doesn't really work for us. And I think that's our starting point, same as yours, is what can we do and how do we have this conversation and take away all the connotations that come with being evaluated or reviewed.
Yeah, and you talk about time, this is the day camp pod, right?
Right.
And everybody listening to this podcast right now is like, at some point in this podcast is going to be like, I don't know if I'm going to have time for that, And as I always like to say on this podcast, you can, if it becomes a priority, then you figure out how to make it a priority and you make it happen.
Right.
I called my process check-ins from way back when, because I hated the confrontational sort of connotation of the word evaluation and all. But, I think that most camp operators, camp people, right, they would all agree that we are in the development business with children, right? And then, so then why aren't we in the people development, right? Kids' lives matter, staff lives matter too, we should all be in this development business. And just speaking personally, I've been doing this for a while. I am still getting better at a lot of aspects of these character traits that we try to teach, the kids and the staff at camp.
Yeah, and I think that's where it kind of becomes personal for Daniel and I, having gone through it at different levels, either attending camp or working at camp and then managing staff at camp. You realize what a transformative process being on staff at a summer camp is. And for some people, it's just one summer. One summer's enough. It can change your life in very meaningful ways. And we wanted to make sure that that was being captured and endorsed and kind of qualified for people rather than just being a passive part of the experience, because then we can improve on it.
And another thing I'll add in is that, we want camp to be a developmental place, and it also gets to be a place of a professional workspace, right? It's a place for professional development. And so when we move, from the camper development to the staff development, we're not just talking about the character traits and building, values and community. We're also talking about the professional value of working at camp, which we know is a huge part of the conversation nationally for day camps, overnight camps, and everything in between, in terms of how we're recruiting staff and retaining staff as well. So this isn't just an in-summer process that we're talking about. This actually pervades the entire year cycle of staffing. Yeah, it kind of ties the two together, right? We want it to be an experience that people enjoy and is valuable personally and professionally, while at the same time supporting what camps need, which is, at the end of the day, staff who do their job extremely well and take care of campers and provide transformational experiences for them.
Right. And one of the buzzwords, I hate using that word, but one of the buzzwords that Daniel used earlier when he first described what it should be, not evaluations, he said support. And, I'm guessing that at the national conference and at Tri-State, there's going to be a whole lot of sessions about supporting your staff, right? And if you can frame it as we're supporting you to become the best version of yourself that you can get, again, just like we do with the kids, then I think we're stepping in the right direction. And I think that you're going to get staff that are buying into that, that they're not just there to get a paycheck. The paychecks generally aren't that big. You're there to get better, right? To build a better person.
Yep. And it's messaging that camps are really familiar with. As you say, we do it for the kids all the time. So let's make sure that we're also doing it for the staff. because camps are familiar with doing it. So it's not a big leap to making this work for young adults as well.
The
And-
other
and
thing
coming back-
that can be
Oh, go ahead,
used
Sam.
for is they can give us feedback, then we need to ask them for how did we communicate in the beginning, or what haven't we done, and how can we support you, so they can all be tied together. So
That's really good, really true as well. Like it kind of always seems to come from a top-down perspective when you talk about reviews or evaluation or anything like that. And I think what often gets missed then, again, in real time, I know a lot of camps will send out surveys post-summer to both families and to their staff, but you're missing a huge opportunity, especially given the staff turnover in the summer camp industry, to actually make the experience the best it can be in real time, for sure.
And I want to come back to that word support to layer on what's being shared here, which is we don't typically connect evaluations to the mental, emotional, social support that staff need in order to succeed during the summer. But Andy, you actually mentioned that you're nervous, leading up to some of those, or that, directors generally are like, what's going to happen in these tense conversations? And there's a lot of emotion around evaluations, and we don't think of it that way because we treat it really formally in a kind of a dissonant way to the way we operate the rest of camp, which is more informal and more social. We suddenly draw a hard line on evaluations, and using the word itself, can be triggering as well. But what we see, and I experienced as a supervisor, is I got nervous. People were like, no, we have to be confidential. We can't be near any other staff when we're doing this evaluation. And that just creates this high stakes scenario that doesn't leave anybody feeling great at the end of the day. I mean, even if you got a good review and I get to give you a good review, it still came in with this tension. And when you start to peel back the layers and think about what are we trying to gain out of this and how do we want to approach it, we also should be talking about the benefits that we can create for that mesh support, that mental, emotional, social health support that staff very much need.
Yeah, I love that you talk about looking at it with intention and from a proactive perspective, because I think that I love Andy's verbiage around the check-in. And I think one of the key things to really making this whole process work is doing something in your intake process as well. So not just when you are doing orientation, but from the beginning, setting the culture, like this is what happens here. So we're checking in a few times throughout the season first, like at the initial part, to understand what you want to get out of this season. And when you do it from that perspective, then they're almost setting their own expectations and evaluate, metrics by which they can determine, kind of self-evaluate. Okay, this is what I said I wanted to do at the beginning when I was fresh and wasn't tired, etc. And
Right.
so then by the middle, when you're actually doing those evaluations, they can be, you weave yours in there also as the owner and what is important to you, but then it's a collaborative thing, and it's not up and down and hierarchical, but it's more so like, this is a community. And,
Right.
and so now the staff are able to evaluate themselves against metrics that they set. So then it's not like, I told you, you should have did this. And then, it's more like, oh, geez, I did say that. I had this zeal. And the conversation can more be around, well, what happened? And unearthing the things that happened in the middle. Were you tired? Were you overworked? And it allows the owner as well as the staff person to say, like, do we need more staff here? Do what happened? Was it a certain group of kids? Was there a behavior issue? Or, helping us to really create what our coaching and training can look like throughout the year collaboratively, as opposed to you did great, you didn't do great, and that whole demeanor. Even when Andy said like how we frame it, I think as owners, we really need to do like what Dr. Daniel said and take the step back and say, this isn't just about making it sound good, but really approaching it with the posture of this will make everything better. There's no way to make a good customer experience without having a good employee experience, because we make the experience. So yeah, I love this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on like one of my main points, which is the staff having some agency in the process. You know, they're not just coming into a machine that kind of judges them and spits them out the other end. You're involving them from the start. And we actually advocate for, you know, doing that from the minute you're hiring, or the minute you're not even hiring, you're advertising. You know, put your messaging out there about what kind of employer you are and what kind of staff you're hoping to work with. So that's really important. Yeah, good point.
All right, so before we keep plugging forward, I just have to plug our friends at Commercial Recreation Specialists, CRS. If any of you folks have any kind of watering hole, a pond or a lake, a creek, I don't know, if it rains and you got a big puddle down in your lower field, like I do, they got great boats. I just have to tell you, we're talking about kayaks, pedal boats, corkles, these cute little things for the little ones, right? Day camp people. High quality commercial grade boats that will hold up to the constant use of campers. And also, you know, at Liberty Lake, we're very big into SUPs, right? The paddle boards, which have been really, really cool, which you don't need that much water to be able to do. So anyway, Commercial Recreation Specialists, check them out. They will be at all of the camp conferences that you're planning on going on. They are the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep camp going strong. Check them out at crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun. All right, folks, moving on. So we touched on a little bit of that adversarial kind of thing. You know, I remember the first time I was quote unquote evaluated, sat down, reviewed, etc. And it just all of a sudden it does something to your physiology, right? If you're not used to it. Matter of fact, even if you are used to it, let's just forget it, right? How do we get past that? How do we ease that? How do we make this a thing where you're not talking to somebody that's like emotionally hijacked, because that's a big issue.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in with I think a systemic issue, which is that the person you're sitting down with, if you're a staff member, the person you're sitting down with is not trained on giving evaluations. In my experience of any camp I've worked with, there's no specific training on that aspect of being a leader. There's a lot of stuff about leading groups. There's a lot of stuff about communication and collaboration, but the evaluative part, that is a skill set. That's something that in a corporate setting, people are trained on, and there are professionals who develop the evaluation system, and then there are clear expectations that are set. And so there's a systemic issue that creates that uncertainty, that ambiguity, that discomfort that you experience when you sit down for your first or your 18th evaluation, whenever it is in your staffing career, and discomfort for the leader, because they haven't been trained to know what they're doing in that context. And I think, to me, that's the biggest challenge that we're not paying attention to. And then we see the symptoms of it, Andy, that you're speaking to of what that experience is when you sit down for those evaluations.
Yeah, I just, people who run camps, right? They fancy themselves to be human Swiss Army knives, could do a little bit of everything, right? And this, which is such an important part of what we do, it just gets lumped in with, whatever, it becomes more of an afterthought as opposed to like a really intentional forethought. And it's a science, like Daniel's saying, like people, people major in HR, people get trained on this in a corporate setting, but Daniel's right, workplace psychology. But yet, we are, we're giving people who are school teachers who, write report cards for kids, but they generally don't, have a thoughtful conversation with a 21-year-old. It's not in their skill set, right? And they're fish out of water on this, and they do need training on this. And if you're creating a relationship, as Sarah was sort of alluding to prior, of mutual respect, and I'm here to help you, I'm your union rep kind of vibe, and it's a support relationship, then it becomes less adversarial. One of the first things we did, even before we were with E21, is we took out the grade thing, right? The you're going to get a 91 or a 76 or whatever, because we felt that we had a lot of high aspiring people with us. We had straight A students. And then all of a sudden they're put in a situation where they're taking care of other people's children, which they're not that great at initially, right? And now they get a 76. And the next thing you know, they want to quit or jump off a bridge or something like that, and that's not the intention. The intention is growth,
Right.
All that.
Right. And I think, what you were saying as well about, developing relationships for anyone to be able to give or accept feedback in any form, there has to be an element of trust involved. And there has to be an element of comfort with the person that you're talking to. Otherwise, it's not going to go in. So you're actually going to waste your time as well. You're going to waste your staff's time. You're going to waste your supervisor's time by having those conversations if they don't lead anywhere. And I find that it's hard to build that kind of trust in a year-round permanent job. It takes time, and it takes a lot of different scenarios to go through as a team. And that's all sped up in the summer camp world, right? So you're asking someone who you've potentially just met a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, to then pass judgment in an evaluation or a review. And so even if you go through the process, is it efficient? Is it effective? Is there a point to it other than ticking the box of we've had a review? Because that person who is being evaluated doesn't necessarily respect or trust the person giving them the feedback in a way that makes them feel like they want to take it on board, and it doesn't feel, like you said, as a kind of a thing that they're doing together. It's not a team effort. It's someone passing judgment. And that someone it's incredibly subjective. As you said, it depends on the person's who are they? Are they a teacher? Are they an 18-year-old who has just been promoted? And last summer, they were on the same team as all their friends, and now they're having to, give them scores or pass judgment. There's so many things that don't make sense about a kind of what we know to be a traditional evaluation or review process. They don't make sense in the real world, but they especially don't make sense in the camp environment with the constraints that we have around time and turnover.
Sure.
Yeah, and Sarah, the real world piece is important to acknowledge, because in the real world, there's been a big shift in how evaluations and developmental check-ins are being done as well. And summer camp often creates its own bubble where it's not learning from outside practices. This happens to be one of the, and in a lot of ways, I should say that makes sense, right? If you're running an all camp capture the flag game, there might not be a lot you can learn from Deloitte Consulting. But if you want to talk about check-ins and evaluations and how to be supportive as a supervisor, you can learn a lot. And actually, I remember, and I looked it up. So in 2015, this conversation was really taking off in the corporate setting. And Harvard Business Review published an article about Deloitte and other companies that were shifting their model from pure evaluation to getting more continuous data points and making those data points more developmental. Still with an expectation of accountability, and still working that in, right? We have to be careful when we preach the importance of creating a supportive check-in versus an evaluation, because we still, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we still want to hold staff accountable for doing their jobs well. So there is a piece to that, but this has been a conversation outside of camp, for 7-8 years now, and we get to catch up and we get to innovate within the camp space, knowing what's best, in our own work environment, and also being open to what we can learn from the outside. And the subjective piece you spoke to obviously resonates with you and I and the conversations we're always having, because the subjectivity within an evaluation is going to not only play out from the evaluator side, but also in the output, in the numbers, right? What do the numbers mean? What is a 91? What is a 76? And so again, and that's something the corporate world's been grappling with now as well, for a few years, is that, what does this all mean and what do we do with it?
Yeah.
I have a dilemma with, I have a lot of staff who have been with me for a long time. So not only do they want to see that their evaluations go up every year because they're learning, they're growing, but they also do a lot of things consistently that are very valuable to me, but are not sexy in any way. And they get sick of me hearing, you're so consistent with the children, but yet that's so important. So I'm always looking for ways to frame their high points in a new way that makes them feel like I am paying attention to this, but it still is important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge point and a really good thing to bring up, that evaluations, especially when they're kind of graded evaluations, miss, which is specificity and evidence. So, you know, telling someone good job, it's nice, but it very quickly loses its, you know, its shine. And what we're looking for and what everyone's looking for is, but why did I do a good job? Or what was it specifically that was a good job? And only by telling somebody that are you going to build on it. You know, you specifically did this, you talked to this camper in a patient and kind way when they were having a hard time. I saw that. Well done. Keep doing that. And what we also want to, for us, have staff leave camp with. So first of all, they're going to continue to build on the good job that you told them they were doing. And they're going to know how to build on it, not just, oh, on Tuesday, I did a good job. What you also want them to do is leave camp and then be able to talk about their camp experience again in a specific way. So if they're going somewhere else talking about camp and they said, I did a good job, that's fine. But if they could say at camp, I was able to, you know, lead a group and challenge myself to work with some difficult behavior issues. And one time I had this, you know, and it's that kind of specific anecdotal evidence that's going to help everybody, the staff member and the camp itself and the kids. So it's a really good point, I think.
And the specific timely piece, Sam, to your dilemma gets at exactly what they want, which is, how have I grown? Well, you're growing in an observable way. Early as a counselor, you might be, you know, consistent with a camper, you know, someone's homesick throughout a 2-week session, and every day you've been really there for them, providing that support. Great. But later in your career, you might be really consistent running all camp programs, and every program you run once a week hits big with every staff member, right? And every camper. Everybody loves that. And then you work your way up into a supervisory role, and now you're consistent with your staff. Now you're consistent in the way that your staff are excelling because of your leadership. And so being specific and timely, you know, gives you that inherent ability to recognize their growth. And they're also helping drive those conversations, you know, back to Tiffany's point of the collaborative approach, that you're hearing from them and you're seeing them work as well.
Yeah, I love it. I had a sponsorship from Nike for my camp at one point, and we went through these trainings with them, and they, exactly what you're saying, Sarah, I think they called it TLC, because like all about the acronyms, and it was like tell it, label it, compliment it. And so I think because you're quick to say, like Sam saying, like the compliment, but if you don't have like the specificity, then it doesn't matter. So it's like the telling it is really like naming it, labeling it is like the behavior that we want to see at camp and why this is so amazing, and then compliment. And so it's really like that cadence of like, I said it, you did it, I said it. And so now they kind of like know why. And so that always helps me remember.
Yeah, I love that. I think Michael Bramline does DLP, define, label, praise.
Oh yeah, that's my stuff.
Yep, and you know, and I think it started out for kids. You know, let's talk about what the kids are doing and tell them, and let's hit our star points, or you know, whatever our kind of milestones are that we're trying to encourage kids in. But it works for staff clearly. It's really important.
This brings up one other downfall or pitfall of evaluations, which is supervisors being present to see these behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And how many data points, if you're doing an evaluation and you're giving a score and you're doing it like at the 4-week mark and the 8-week or the 3 and the 6 week, like what are you really basing it on? I mean, so much of it is on your history with a person, right? Your personal biases and interactions with them. How other people talk about a person. And so when you shift from evaluation to developmental check-in, you start to open up a truly safe space. Sarah and others hit on this idea of trust. Well, trust comes from truth. And truth can only happen if you're honest about what you're seeing and when you're seeing it, and you don't try to overstate or overstep your knowledge area, or right, your observable behavior database of someone in their job.
Yeah.
How do you think supervisors can compensate for that though? Because if they're not always on the ground, like what sort of initiatives do you think can be put in place so that they have more data?
I think that's where the staff agency comes into it. So if, as we talked about, you've talked about your culture, you've talked about your goals, your expectations before the summer even begins, then the staff can take a little bit of control of their own actions and their own behavior and their own growth. So when they come to sit down with a supervisor, the supervisor can absolutely say, tell me how your week has been, tell me how your day has been, what has been challenging, what do you wish I had seen, and open it up for the staff member to kind of bring their own stories and tell their own tales to the supervisor. They don't have to be everywhere, but they have to, and this is a skill that you're giving your supervisors then, right? Asking leading questions. This is mentorship, where you don't have to always be on site observing and evaluating. You can coach a person and talk to them about their experience without you experiencing it too. And I think you're giving your supervisors a gift if you do that, in terms of not feeling like they have to be everywhere at once. And also in terms of having a really useful skill for life in asking these kind of questions and having conversations like that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that doesn't have to only happen in evaluations, right? Like it can be happening throughout, just as you're walking around and happenstance.
Absolutely.
Love that.
And
Absolutely.
Tiffany, it doesn't even have to happen from the supervisor once you've de-escalated from an evaluation, which is a strictly supervisory responsibility. When you move into a conversation and this developmental check-in space, you start to open up for assistant directors or peers, right, to be giving feedback, to sharing what they see, because no longer are we in this, as I experienced, this like confidential, huddle between a supervisor and a staff member that nobody else can know about and creates all this tension. All of a sudden, we've de-escalated and created a safer space for people to be talking about, how are you growing? What are your goals? How can we support you? And those conversations build that trust and that support.
All right, I want to just pause for a moment, because these guys are being so tactful to dance around the actual E21 stuff that they actually do, which we're going to talk about the framework for that in a second. But one thing I want to touch on from what Sam said earlier, the high performing person who's like the straight A student, right? One of the great things about E21 is to find something that they can get better at. So find something they want to get better at. So, Daniel had mentioned getting in front of the whole camp and running an activity, right? Like that's something that is not a typical thing that a normal staff person would do, but if they've been there for 5 years and they can run an all camp, assembly or special event kind of thing, that could be something that we work towards a goal, and you work together, and then you debrief it and all that kind of thing, right? So there are, everybody, even like the greatest camp director in the world, right, has aspects of the job that they can get better at. And it's identifying those things and focusing on that, and not just, are you making sure your kids get to swim on time? Are you making sure that, Johnny's happy and all that kind of stuff, which that's the basic stuff that we want. That's the baseline we want everybody to be good at. All right. But for the high performers, we do have to challenge them and give them stuff to do. Right. So I really do appreciate that. The Day Camp podcast is brought to you by my favorite insurance company, AM Skyer. Yep, they're the leading insurance and strategic partner for many of the finest camps in America. And I got to tell you, every time I call there, I get usually Johanna, right? One of the most friendly voices. You always get a human, okay? 24/7, 12 months a year, middle of the night, in the middle of the summer, you're going to get somebody. It's not some kind of voicemail. It's not some kind of answering service from Mumbai. You're getting a real awesome human from Hawley, Pennsylvania, which is about the nicest humans in the world. They're over 100 years old, AM Skyer. In the business, right? Same family. Okay. I'm really good friends with Jeff and Amy, just awesome humans. All right. And then all my mentors, they were good friends with Hank Skyer, their dad. So anyway, experience the AM Skyer difference. Learn more at amskyer.com. All right, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to hear about this E21 thing. Okay. How many years, Sarah, have we been honing this?
We're pretty much, I think we're coming up to 10 years this year.
Double digits, ladies and gentlemen.
So
okay, lots of trials and error. I consider Liberty Lake a guinea pig in many ways.
Absolutely, yes.
So I'm going to give you guys the floor because you guys have talked about it so eloquently, but it really is a great framework. And take it away, folks.
Okay, well, yeah, go ahead, Daniel. I was gonna.
I'll start off with
our
our overarching message, which is the goal of E21 is not just about the evaluation, the check-in, but creating a year-round ecosystem that improves and strengthens the value proposition of a camp to the staff members about how great of a place this is to work, about the professional value you're going to get from working at camp, and how we're going to support you on that journey. And it strengthens the value proposition that staff members can use to come back to camp and move up the ranks in their staffing position. And once they hit the inflection point of, working somewhere other than summer camp, how they can strengthen their value proposition to future employers. So that's the framing I'll give. Sarah, take it away.
Yeah, no, it's excellent framing. And I think it feels, I don't know, it feels harder to choose to work at camp than it did when I came and chose to work at camp 17, 18, 20 summers ago. For me, it really was just about having some fun and having an adventure. And what we'd want to do is for camp to still be all those things. It should be fun. It should be adventure. It should be somewhere that you grow. But it's only going to happen if people also see the value. And sometimes it's not even the staff that need to see the value, but it's the people around the staff. So let's talk parents who maybe are convinced camp is a waste of time as a job or just a bit of fun, or a school counselor, or, what we want to do is elevate the camp job for everybody so that they see it as a valuable, worthwhile thing to do.
Which is what it is. We're just explaining it better.
Right.
We're doing all this anyway, maybe not as great as we should be, but this is what we do. Anyway.
Yeah, and every time we run E21 training and everything that we develop within E21, we say this is nothing new. All we have done, and I'll say in terms of E21 and what we've built, is it came from our third partner, Scott Brody, who wanted to find a way at his camp where I worked to recognize what the staff were doing in their role. And he wanted to find a way to kind of give them the endorsement to share with the outside world. Here's what summer camp means as a staff member, and here's what I gained from it. And then once we built that out for our staff, we realized, hang on, well, then we have to train our staff in a certain way. And then we have to train our supervisors to support our staff in a certain way. And it became its own kind of vehicle. And Liberty Lake have been there with us from the start when we said, hey, maybe this would work in all camps, not just our camp. And it grew into its own kind of program, which Daniel has vastly kind of added to with his workplace psychology knowledge and camp industry knowledge. So, E21 is so many things and such a difficult thing to give an elevator pitch for. But ultimately, it really is about just harnessing what you're already doing, what camps are already doing, and trying to provide a little standardization for it, trying to remove a little subjectivity, and also just trying to make it worthwhile. And that's where the kind of replacement of the traditional evaluation comes in, because we don't want to pay lip service and check a box. We want to actually give staff an incredible experience and show the rest of the world what they're doing.
Yeah, and what we've done is we've addressed as many of the pitfalls as we can. We've addressed this idea that this is a top-down process, that this just comes from the supervisor. We've embraced this idea of a developmental check-in, of a collaborative approach, of the staff member providing their goals and what they're excited about, what they've accomplished, and their challenges, and how the supervisor can then support them. And we've really shifted from evaluators for our supervisory roles to coaches and mentors. How do we get them to really come in on a weekly basis thinking about that? And weekly, we talked about de-escalating the evaluation to being more developmental. So when we talk about a weekly check-in, that could be a one-on-one, that could be a supervisor and a staff member having their check-in, or it could be in groups, because we have that space now for peers, or we have that space for assistant unit heads to be leading those conversations and guiding those staff in that way. And the most important piece is that we've standardized everything, not only through a skills framework. We have 6 essential skills for the 21st century: communication, critical thinking, leadership, creativity, collaboration, and professionalism. But we've used that framework of 6 skills to guide everything from recruiting and social media presence, to interview questions, to the in-summer experience about expectations, accountability, and growth, to the post-summer experience of how you translate your staff accomplishments into your professional accomplishments on resumes, in job interviews, in applications for grad school or other programs, and fellowships. And so we've really taken that skills framework, which was a lot of what Scott Brody came in with as he was starting E21 and working with Sarah on it. And then we've built out all of these resources and tools so that before the summer, you're working with us on training and hiring and recruiting and interviews. And then we train camp leaders to bring that to their supervisors and staff members, so that as summer's starting, you can bring these tools into your ecosystem. And then after, and I should add, during the summer, not only do we have scripts and worksheets for these check-ins to give structure and standardization across supervisors and staff members. Everybody is talking the same language, working in the same developmental framework. They're also giving feedback. Sam, you mentioned that 2-way communication. So we have a pulse survey that staff members are using as well, and sending that data to the camp leaders to process and understand who do we need to check in, what supervisors are hitting the mark, what supervisors get to be coached into another level of supervision. And then after camp, helping staff members and camps use that evidence, use that data to not only enhance, the way they talk about their camp experience, but also to think about who's coming back next summer, how are they coming back next summer, what roles are they ready for, so that this really becomes a comprehensive approach. And the last piece I'll add is that we have some separate processes in place for those red flag moments, for those staff members that you as a supervisor or assistant supervisor can't coach someone on safety challenges or physical safety of the campers. And so that gets escalated. That's beyond my capacity to coach you on. The expectation is there that when you cross that red line, we need to bring in my coach, my supervisor, and that gets escalated quickly. But those moments are few and far between to what the general population of staff members need and what our camps require and what will truly benefit those staff and those campers. So we've thought about it. We have plenty of material that, lays all this out really clearly, trying to give it, as Sarah said, in an elevator pitch or even just verbally doesn't always do justice for it. But knowing that, we have over 30 camps participating in E21, and we're excited to open it up. And some of those are overnight camps and some of those are day camps as well. So we know that, this process is a partnership where we integrate with camps' existing structures and help them shift the culture, and shifting culture takes time. So we also have a lot of patience, and we have an onboarding and, a learning curve built in as well.
Yeah, I think it's a culture shift, and that's an important thing to think about too.
Yeah, I love that. I love also just like how you talk about just as it's described, it just raises the professionalism of camp. So often we're just disregarding, like out of school time professionals or this or that. Oh, it's not high paying. It's not this, it's not that. But when you take that cast off of it and really say like, no, you're not only, as owners, this is something that can raise our professionalism and our pride in the work we're doing and the difference that we're making, but also like even you talked about how I think you were saying like the staff will have things that they can later use on their resume, right? Like that's a value add, and there's so many benefits from working in camp that enhance those 21st century skills that are needed in leadership roles far out, in corporate and everywhere else in your own life. I just love that this provides some structure for that and creates a level of professionalism that honestly seems to like uplift the whole industry. I can't wait to check it out.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks,
thank you
Tiffany.
very
And
much. And
E21.org, right?
yep,
E21.org.
that's us, E21.
e21.org. And we're also talking about coaching and mentoring. You know, I said the corporate world has already been in this game for 7 or 8 years. So getting those supervisors, those new, 21st century supervisory skills of coaching and mentoring makes a big difference. And then, yeah, provide structure, which reduces the burden on camp leaders to creating that structure and enforcing that structure and following through on what are we giving our staff and how are we, making staffing decisions in the future and how are we putting those value propositions out there. So we really think of ourselves as adding capacity for camp leaders and strengthening the experience, not only for supervisors and staff, but also for campers. We have great data out there. I do some work with the Foundation for Jewish Camp. We know that the positivity of the staff experience transcends to the positivity of the camper experience. Happy campers come from happy counselors. So we think about that a lot as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that has been mentioned earlier is the staff buy-in, right? Is that making them feel part of the process. And the whole E21 process starts with them sort of doing a little self-evaluation and talking about their goals. And then you referencing those throughout the camp season. And just, a couple of words I want to throw into this thing here is intentionality, which is, again, this has just usually been an afterthought and something we do because we have to do it and that kind of thing. But this is just really intentional about the why, incorporating the why into the how, right? And then the other thing is accountability. Frankly, this sounds great, but if the directors aren't holding the middle management accountable, which aren't holding the frontline people accountable, don't even do this. Okay.
Mhm.
Listen to this and be like, wow, that was a great podcast. Okay. And go do something else. Because if this is about accountability, and if you can't ensure that these things are taking place, then it's the same thing. Like if you can't ensure safety at baseball, you wouldn't have baseball, right? If you can't ensure that kids aren't going to drown in the pool, you wouldn't have a pool. You have to have lifeguards. You're ensuring, right? This is ensuring that your staff is going to be supported. Isn't that important? In this day and age, it's all we talk about now is staff being supported, their mental health, et cetera, et cetera. This is a framework to make that happen. So this is a put your money where your mouth is proposition, if you ask me, in this day and age, like at this moment, after the 2021 staff reckoning that everybody experienced, like this is just super, super important.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you for raising it. We've talked about this, Daniel and I, because we see, people will have chatter in some of the online groups about staff appreciation and how can we make our staff feel valued, and some really nice and cute and great ideas are in there. Let's, ask them what their favorite candy bar is and surprise them with it.
A tie-dye headband. Let's give them tie-dye headbands.
Right. And
we're not saying don't do that.
No, don't do that.
It's about
but if you had a budget of $10, $20 per staff member, invest it in something that's going to have a bigger systemic change, like Daniel said at the start. This is something that will have a lasting impact for them long after they've eaten their candy bar and lost their bandana.
And summer after summer, right? This is about recruitment, retention, as well. So not just in summer engagement and support. This really shifts the culture long term for a camp.
Yeah, and culture is a big thing because that 16-year-old 10 years from now could be the supervisor, and if you're bringing them through a process that is giving them skills, that is lifting their game every year, right? And within a framework of give and take and support, and not adversarial, you got a D, he got a B kind of vibe like they're so used to in school. It adds to the whole thing that you're trying to preach about your camp, that you're this uplifting community, supportive of one another, blah, blah, blah. Say a lot of stuff, right? But you got to put your money where your mouth is. And again, it's not just money. It is commitment to do this, right? It is valuing this and treating it like it's important and treating it like it's an actual priority, which, Lord help us, it should be these days.
This is perfect timing. I run a before and after school program, and Tuesday we have our staff training, and then it's evaluation time coming up. So now I'm reframing what I'm training on for Tuesday. I'm going to get that initial feedback on their goals and how we're doing. And then I'm going to set up another training with my staff who evaluate them to try to get to them to reframe it and to not rush through it like past years. And yeah, and these are high schoolers and college students that they're going to be evaluating. They've maybe never thought about how they're doing or how, you know, the people around them are doing. And so this is great. Thank you.
No, yeah, I think it's applicable in so many ways. So happy to talk through it anytime.
All right, well, check out e21.org. You can reach out to Sarah and Daniel. We'll have their contact or specific contact information in the show notes. Okay, so you could literally just like click and do the phone thing with them. So I want to thank these guys for coming out today, all right, and spending time with us. Sarah, Lord knows it's probably like 3 a.m. in Scotland. You know,
Thank you for having
two
me.
little kids.
You
know,
can
3 little
Google
kids.
it. You can.
But I want to thank the Go Camp Pro team, Camptivities and commercial recreation specialists for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out the show notes I just referenced and all our episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info, like I said, for the show, for our guests, and for me, Sam, and Tiff. Thanks for listening and making yourself a better Day Camp Pro. We'll be back in 2 weeks with, I hear it might be Michael Brandwine and another episode of the Day Camp Pod.